Well, greetings, everybody. Hope you're doing have a nice day. And I've enjoyed this lesson that I've researched and worked on. It's got kind of an odd title that you may find kind of interesting, but I'll explain it along the way of where it comes from. The title is Dimming Your Headlights Life's Odds, Ends, and Dots. There are a lot of odd and end things in our lives that each of us don't know about. And there's some things about my life you don't know about. There are odds and ends, and neither your life or I don't know about that we possibly would find it very fascinating. We all have odds and ends. We have those various facts that make up our life, much like a jigsaw puzzle. It's sort of like connecting the dots. The dots by themselves do not stand out, but drawing a line between the dots, you begin to see a picture. Now, here's some examples of what I am talking about that I did a little research on. Did you know that there's no word in the English language that rhymes with the words month, orange, silver, and purple? Did you know the dot or the letter I is called a tittle? Tittle. And there are more people killed annually by donkeys than die in air crashes. And lastly, the phrase rule of thumb is derived from an old English law which states that you could not beat your wife with anything wider than your thumb. I did not know these things. Now, here are a few more odds and ends and dots about me that you may not know. I learned how to swim rather quickly by falling into a swamp that was full of alligators and snakes. I used to drive a very large diesel truck for a living. I'm double jointed in my knees. And lastly, I used to have long blonde hair. Long time ago. It's hard to imagine, isn't it? I mean, you can make your own list, but the dots by themselves are just odd or end facts in your life. Putting them together, though, creates a picture of whom and what you are. It even gives a clue to where you have been and where you're going about your life. Now, I want to discuss a weakness that I feel is my biggest problem. I'm sure I have many more than that, but this is really one that's a difficult problem for me. It is judging, both too quickly and too absolute when I judge other people. We all so often judge dots. We see a single dot or incident and create a picture that we determine that it's all wrong. One dot, one odd, or one end doesn't require any action on our part by itself. And knowing them singularly won't necessarily improve to any degree life, but adding them up is a whole other story. We not only judge people on just singular dots, but also a job, a relationship, or life's decisions for the future. Those single dots become so important that we use them to make a cataclysmic judgment. We judge a single dot or a fact or an impression, which determines if we quit a job or we get out of a position that we're in at work. We allow friends to slip away. We allow our parental relationships or grandparental relationships just to cave in, all because of a dot or an odd or an end. Your God sees the whole picture and rejoices that every odd and end and every dot is part of his creation. He sees who we really are and expects us to do the same with those around us as well. We want others to really know us and give us a chance. So why can't we do the same with other people? What discoveries can we find by that chance? We may just have an odd and end or a dot, but they lead to a panorama of beauty and truth if we just allow it to. Now, our scripture lesson today is from Jesus' message from the Sermon on the Mount when he talks about odds and ends and dots. It comes from Matthew chapter 7, the first 5 verses. Let me read it to you. And you've heard this before. Judge not that you be not judged. For with what judgment you judge, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured again for you. And why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not consider the plank that is in your own eye? Or how will you say to your brother, let me pull the speck out of your eye, when a log is in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. Isn't that a great passage? Well, let's look a bit more closely about why we judge people so easily. I like to use another term. It's called attribute, and you'll see why I want to use that word to help us understand this a little more in depth. Attributions are thoughts that we have about others that help us make sense of why people do the things that they do. Attribution answers the questions of why does he or she do that? And why did I do that? When we go through the process of answering these questions, our brains are attempting to understand the causes of some social behavior. There are two types of attributions that I want to talk about that we make about other people's behavior. And we're all about this. When we make a situational attribution, we believe that their behavior is due to something in their situation. For example, a coworker or a friend or a family member or even a neighbor might have kind of been short with us because they're tired or overworked. The next one is the personality attributions. They're more like a personal character judgment. When we make these attributions, we believe the behavior is due to the person's personality, not situation. Assuming that that same person who was short with us, impatient or unkind, is making a personal attribution. They're just not a nice person. So personality attributions are more enduring and long lasting. Being impatient or unkind is a consistent way of being compared to being tired or overworked, which may be temporary. For example, think about this situation. When we're walking our dogs or just taking a normal stroll through our neighborhood around, we wave and say hi to our neighbors who are in their yards or driving by their open window. We want to create a friendly relationship, a friendly neighborhood, and just trying to be nice. So we do this as much as we can. Now, occasionally, we get no response from our neighbors. We could make a personality attribution about them and think that they're just mean or rude or bad people who are not friendly because of their personality. Or we could give them the benefit of the doubt and think about situational reasons why they may not wave back at me. Perhaps they're distracted because they got some earphones on, or their mother or grandfather had learned that they're not doing well. Maybe they're stressed at work and therefore distracted at home. Maybe they have those earbuds in their ear and they just couldn't see you or hear you to say hello. That's situational. Making situational attributions instead of personality ones about our neighbors makes us feel better since we don't think of our neighbors as jerks and rude, and it makes my future communication with them better for the same reason. It's okay for later on to try again. Now, here's another example. So if we're standing in line in a grocery store and the checker is scowling and being rude to the shoppers in her line, we may quickly decide that she is a nasty, unpleasant person. We're attributing her behavior to her personality instead of her situation. We're making a judgment about that. That's her personality. Or if we read something online on our computers or something like that on YouTube, whatever it may be, that rubs us the wrong way, we decide the person who wrote it is an idiot or is someone that's a wacko or something like that. It's a deplorable person. We know nothing about them on a personal way, but that little snapshot that we're given and from what we judge their character to be lacking the qualities that we deem are acceptable, that we accept them. We're reacting to this picture of them and attributing their words to a deficiency in their personality. Now, if we were to make a concerted effort to check in with ourselves throughout the day and see how often our minds are in that judging mode, we might be shocked at how much mental space judgment takes up. We might be find out that if we're honest, we would like to admit that all this negative judgment of others and ourselves is not adding to the quality of life that we wish for ourselves. It puts us in a bad mood. It has a perspective. It has a very negative approach. It takes the joy and happiness out of our life. We are steeped in negativity. And it's hard to manifest a life of peace and joy and freedom when we're giving so much energy to the negative. Research has found that people tend to overestimate personality and underestimate the situation when making attributions, especially with people they don't know very well. When we make attributions for people that we know well and care about, this tendency flips over. Now, think about your best friend or somebody like that that you feel so highly about. If they didn't call you back right away, would you think it's because they're rude or cold hearted? Well, probably not. You think of a specific reason they may not be able to call you back, and because you know a lot about their situation. Maybe they're stuck at a meeting or caring for a loved one, or maybe they're just busy cooking or doing something else, or maybe they're sick. We always give these reasons for it. That's situational. It's easy to praise or blame others for their actions, but unless we know their motivation, we really know nothing at all. Not judging is a gift we can give to other people. There's a story that's one of my favorites that I've kept in my files that I want to share with you that kind of talks about this. It's an old Chinese legend that speaks to the good things in life. I came across it recently. A group of elderly, cultured gentlemen met often to exchange wisdom and drink tea. Each host tried to find the best and the finest and most costly varieties of tea to create exotic blends that would arouse the admiration of his guest. When the most venerable and respected of the group entertained, he served his tea with unprecedented ceremony, measuring the leaves from the golden box. The assembled Epicureans of this tea praised this exquisite tea and just talked how wonderful it was. The host smiled and said, "The tea that you have found so delightful is the same tea our peasants drink. I hope it'll be a reminder," he said, "to all the good things in life are not necessarily the rarest or the costliest. It's all because of that golden box." What a great truth that is about something else that struck me when I read this. Isn't it funny how we think the good things of life come in a beautiful package? Once we're impressed with the container, we bring the value of the contents to a higher level automatically. I do this with people. Maybe you do too. I see a movie star, a politician running for office, or just a business-like person, a CEO, who looks very successful. And I think that they're of high quality of their life and of great value. I mean, after all, the golden box only holds exquisite tea. If I know this is a fallacy and an illusion, then why am I always surprised when a common and even shabby box can hold such exquisite tea that a common person enjoys? When a person I discount or quickly make judgment about shows such high value, worth, and character, I'm reminded of my shallow, arrogant thinking. I don't know why I am so judgmental. I do know I am disappointed, even hurt, when others discount me just because I don't fit into their prescribed image of high value. I don't like to be judged so quickly, so why do I do the same to others? You know, our brains are wired to make automatic judgment about other people and their behaviors so that we can move through the world without spending too much time or energy on understanding what we see. Sometimes we engage in a more thoughtful and slow processing of others' behaviors. You might recognize this as ruminating on what your friend, coworker, or neighbor, whoever it may be, that has bothered you or is out of character for them. You stop and thought about it a little more. An awareness of this natural tendency for all of us and process is the very key to changing the way that we react to others' behavior and communication. This awareness and patience for others sets the very stage for a very good quality and conscious communication with wisdom. It's a very useful exercise to give others the benefit of the doubt by thinking about their situation rather than jumping to a personality attribution. But there are limitations to this approach. We don't always have time to get in another person's situation to understand it. So making personality judgments tends to be a lot quicker and more automatic and so much easier and takes us off the guilt trip, even if those types of judgments are very less ideal. Now, there's a way to flip this around in this habit. If we're willing to give some effort to changing this paradigm, we might find that the whole world opens up for us and we begin to feel more compassion and empathy for other people. We don't judge people for the choices they make when you don't know the options they had to choose from. In order to make this change, we should focus on situational attributions when we're able and are confronted with other people who are behaving badly. This simply means that we're able to observe someone's actions and then think about what might be causing them to behave that way instead of automatically chalking it up to them being a nasty person. That same scenario I talked about just briefly a moment ago about the checkout line could result in a whole different, totally different outcome in our brain and in our energy if we just get curious about that woman, that cashier. What may have happened today that caused her to be so miserable? Could she have gotten bad news about a loved one? Could she have stayed up all night with a sick child? When we engage our brains in this way, we allow others to be imperfect without snapping to judgment that closes us off from them. Now, when this happened to me one time in a grocery store recently, I spoke to a woman with a smile on my face. I simply said, after she was kind of testy, I said, "Well, I hope your day gets better." She looked at me for the first time and with all of a sudden tears in her eyes, she explained that her mother was in a nursing home hours away and she wasn't doing very well. And she wanted nothing more than to go and be with her. I was able to hear her and show compassion, and that's all she wanted. She smiled back and said, "Thank you." How often do we let opportunity like this pass because we're so busy conjuring judgments about people around us? If we're honest, we are all just doing the best we can every single day. I mean, some days we fall flat on our faces. On those days, we hope someone will see us, not as a horrible person, but as someone who deserves compassion and love. We'll talk about this more in just a moment. So, moving forward, I suggest taking a middle of the road approach. Spend time proactively and in perspective, taking when you can, be aware of the human tendency to make personality attributions when you can't do otherwise. Know that that's going to come your way. Well, let's get a little more insightful on this human behavior, because to understand it as a human is to apply it in our relationship with our Christian walk. So why do we judge so quickly? Well, according to an article in Psychology Today, our brains are trying to make sense of why people do the things they do. We're processing it. We make snap judgments about people because it moves us on to the next thing our brains need to work out. So, in other words, it's the quickest way to answer the question, why did they say or do that? When we see someone or do something that makes no sense or evokes a visceral response of anger and aversion of what they did. So let's move on now to the point of how do we apply this in our Christian walk. There are three lessons that I want to share with you about that I have found out that I think are important that we can take this idea now as a human being and apply it within our spiritual walking. You probably have heard the statement, you can't judge me. Who are you to judge me? So that leads to the question, is it wrong to judge people? In our modern and secular society, the word judge has a negative connotation. Most people think that judging is the same as condemning. However, is this what the Bible really tells us? After all, as Christians and humans, we always judge things from what to wear to what course to take in college or what to have for dinner that night. Now, most Christians are quick to point out that the words of Jesus in Matthew 7, when he said, judge not that you be not judged. Does God or Jesus forbid us from giving judgment? Before you answer that, is it worth noting that the entire book in the Bible was named Judges? Even the term judge in the King James Version is mentioned 550 times within the context. So judgment is obviously a big topic for God. Moreover, we also find Jesus saying this, judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment, he said in verse 24. So for this reason, we need to take a second look at what Jesus was really meant when he said not to judge. The problem with some people is they immediately stop right there in Matthew 7:1, not reading the whole context of the verse. If you continue reading Matthew 7, we get a broader view of what Christ's message really was intending to say. Quote, for with what judgment you judge, you will be judged, and with the measure you use it will be measured back to you. And for this verse, Jesus is telling us the reason for his statement. The first statement does not mean that we should never judge people, but rather he is teaching us the proper way to judge. In this post, in this message I'm sharing with you, I want to share with you those three reasons I mentioned a little bit earlier. Lesson number 1, judge yourself first. Before we judge others, it's important that we judge ourselves. Now, Matthew 7 further tells us this. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when there is a log in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. Now, speck, the word speck here, is translated from the Greek word karphos, which means a twig. This verse is implying that we are too quick in finding fault with others that we forget to look at ourselves first. You see the twig in your brother's or sister's eye while you cannot see the beam in your own eye. We're so concerned with other people's faults and sinning and failures that we tend to ignore our own sins, which is greater in comparison. I mean, how many times are we like that? We judge other people without judging ourselves first. We look around and say, oh, look at that sinner. Look at that person, how they're dressed. Look at how they're acting. Thankfully, I'm not like them. I'm a better Christian than that. We need to judge ourselves and correct our faults first if we're to have a proper mindset when we judge, and a must that we are not too guilty of the same sin. By judging others, you make yourself easy to judge. Furthermore, judging ourselves is not enough. If we see a sin or wrongdoing in us, which is almost always the case, we must be quick to ask forgiveness and to change our ways. Lesson number 2, judge not according to appearance. It says in 7:24 of John, do not judge according to appearance, but judge with righteous judgment. Now here's another proof that it's okay to judge, provided that you judge with righteous judgment. Judging a righteous judgment does not come from us. It only comes from the wisdom and the knowledge from God. Because we must base our judgment on what God thinks and not what we believe. Our prejudices, our blindness, our bigotry. We need to base our decisions on the Word of God and not on our opinion. John 7:24 is related to the story when the Jews were angry to Jesus because Jesus healed a man on the Sabbath. The Jews were judging Jesus according to the appearance. Now, at the surface, they were strongly convinced that Jesus is breaking the law of Moses or of God, and yet Jesus corrected them with righteous judgment and taught that it is lawful to heal on the Sabbath. The key here is that we must know the facts and truth to perform righteous judgment. We need to judge other people according to the standards of God and not by our own standards. We must avoid judging others to our unstable feelings, but according to the law and the commandments of God. Here's a wonderful story I found that I think really illustrates this. A woman by the name of Dobie Gadiant was a school teacher for 13 years, decided to travel across America and see the site that she always taught about. And so, traveling alone in a truck with a camper in tow, she launched out. Well, one afternoon, rounding a curve on I-5 and near Sacramento in a rush hour traffic, a water pump blew on her truck. She was tired and exhausted, scared, and all alone. In spite of the traffic jam she caused, no one seemed interested in helping her. So, leaning up against the trailer, she prayed, "Please, God, send me an angel, preferably one with mechanical experience." Within 4 minutes, a huge Harley drove up, ridden by this enormous man sporting long black hair, a beard, and tattooed arms. With an incredible air of confidence, he jumped off without even glancing at Dobie, went to work on a truck. Within another few minutes, he flagged down a larger truck, attached a tow chain to the frame of the disabled Chevy, and whisked the whole 56-foot rig off the freeway onto a side street where he calmly continued to work on the water pump. Well, the very intimidated schoolteacher was too dumbfounded to talk, especially when she read the paralyzing words on the back of the leather jacket he was wearing: "Hell's Angels of California." As he finished the task, she finally got up the courage to say, "Thanks so much," and carrying on a brief conversation. Noticing her surprise at the whole ordeal, he looked her straight in the eye and he mumbled, "Don't judge a book by its cover. You may not know who you're talking to." With that, he smiled, closed the hood of the truck, straddled his Harley, and took off. And with a wave, he was gone, fast as he had appeared. Given half a chance, people often crawl out of the boxes into which they've been relegated. Lesson 3 and final. Speak judgment in love. Now that you know that judging is not wrong, we are to go our way and tell other people who are doing wrong, they are to the point that we're already condemning and disregarding them. No, we're not disregarding them. We're not judging them and letting them just go on their own. Is that how we should judge others? No. The Bible tells us this in Ephesians 4:15. Speak the truth in love. So how should we pass judgment? It should be done in love. It must be done because of our outgoing concern to others and with a motive that we only want the best for them. They too are God's holy creation on their own spiritual journey, like us. Do you know one of the reasons why this society is telling us not to judge? Because we don't like people pointing to them their faults. They don't like other people telling them that they're right or wrong. They don't want to be convicted by their conscience. They rather live a life of degradation or wrongness and bad behavior and even sinning than doing the will of God in their lives. Yes, this is the truth, and most people don't like that. People of God are expected to make judgment. If the people of God see something wrong, God expects us to judge and say that it's wrong. If the Bible is clear about an issue, we can say it is wrong. If we see our brother or sister sinning in a loving way, we need to remind that person that the negative effects of their actions. But in all of these, we need to speak the truth in love. We need to judge others' actions with the motivation and the desire that we want that person to stop from their wrongdoing and start doing things right because we care about them. If we don't do any correction to the situation gets worse and may lead to bigger problems. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, one of the great theologians in Germany that was killed at the end of World War II, said this as a great statement. Judging others makes us blind, whereas love is illuminating. By judging others, we blind ourselves, our own evil, and to the grace which others are just as entitled to as we are. So judging is wrong if we do it for the sake of our own sake and for the sense of power or sense of demeaning someone. But if we do it in love and we correct ourselves, that's what he's saying, what I've been talking about, then that is where we have the greatest effect. Truth can hurt. By judging, we can offend people. But this does not mean that we just do nothing for the sake of saving ourselves the trouble. It's up to us on how we deliver judgment or correction that'll be less painful and offensive. If we truly love one another, we need to correct each other and stop others from continuing down the path of destruction. Thus, we must speak the truth in love. So let me make this clear to kind of sum it up. We are only to judge, but never condemn. That is God's prerogative, not ours. God will be the one who ultimately judges them. Yes, we can know a tree by its fruits, but it's only God who can discern the heart. If we begin to retrain our habitual way of passing judgment on others, we can open the door for meaningful connections that will enrich our lives and the lives of others. At the very least, it will enable us to work at developing empathy and compassion for others as they too struggle and try to figure out this thing called life. So let me sum it up here in my conclusion comments. Have you ever been driving late at night and another car is approaching you with their headlights on and they have their brights on? I mean, what is your reaction? Well, if you're like me, you flick your lights real fast to make them dim it down so they know that they're blinding you. And they are. I mean, the glare of their headlights are just overwhelming your eyesight and your view. It's dangerous. The same can be said that you yourself forget about dimming your brights down and you're blinding someone else that's coming at you. We can judge others from an accusing, self-righteous way, and that's by turning our brights on into their eyes and into their hearts, and they cannot see where to go because we're accusing them. And all of a sudden, they're blind. So dim your headlights. Allow others to see where they need to go and help them find the right path for their spiritual journey. Judge yourself and them with graciousness and love as your Heavenly Father does. Every day we have an opportunity to be the light in the world, to raise the vibrational energy around us, and to be an agent of reconciliation and healing. Let's not waste those opportunities by making snap judgments about others and discounting them on a personality and not understanding them so they'd be stuck in the dark. The world needs our light. So go, be the light of the world as God wants you to be. May God bless you.